Assistance Advisory Committee. We just have a few opening remarks to start. We'll open it up to VAAC members who want to kind of say some things to welcome folks, and then we'll jump into the matter of tonight's meeting. But I want to, Beth, if you can kind of start us off with your remarks.
Thanks, Eric. Happy to do that. Welcome, everyone. And welcome to everybody from the Voter Assistance Advisory Committee, the CFB staff, and everyone watching at home. So I'd like to start off by recognizing that May is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And it's also really hard to believe that primary day is less than 7 weeks away. Wow. The CFB and our staff have been really hard at work preparing for these really important elections to support New York City's people-powered democracy. Every member of the New York City Council is up for re-election this year, and we'll be issuing additional payments today in early next week, rather, to candidates participating in our small dollar matching funds program, which provides opportunities for New Yorkers to run for office and keep candidates, incumbents, and challengers alike focused on the interests of voters that they are aiming to serve. Our council districts have been redrawn recently to make them more representative of the city's ever-changing population. And of course, as you'll hear a lot about tonight, you'll be able to read more and more about the redistricting process in our awesome voter analysis report. Of course, as we get closer and closer to the elections, voters are encouraged to check their mailboxes for the official New York City voter guide and visit the guide online at nycvotes.org to confirm their district and learn more about who's running and who is hoping to represent their interests. So, of course, we have a lot of presentations today, as Eric mentioned. So just a couple quick things. We'll be talking a lot about the voter analysis report, and that is a huge lift by a lot of members of the CFB, but most notably the extraordinary policy and research team. So that is just a very, very deep amount of work, making the data work for the people of New York so that it really can shed light on all the work that has been done and what we have left to do to make our democracy work better for everyone across the city. So really a shout out to everybody, and you'll learn more about that really important work today. And then, of course, we'd only know about things if we have our media teams tell us that they exist. So our social media team has been rolling out content across all the platforms, and that's really exciting because we have a really amazing enhanced communication strategy that has been placing emphasis on voter accessibility in our nonpartisan election education program, because of course it is our duty to make sure voters are well informed as they head to the polls to participate in the upcoming elections. Recently, we did a Q&A explainer video with our voting rights and accessibility coordinator, Luke Messina, on the rights of formerly incarcerated voters. Also, Monday, May 1st was the final certification deadline for the 2023 City Council elections, and we have 150 active and registered candidates overall, with 141 of them as CFB program participants, so that is really great. The final numbers may change just a bit based on last-minute notifications, but those numbers should be pretty tight. And lastly, we're getting up there in our post-ballot public funds payments amounts, but we've got 31 candidates so far and over 3.6 million in pre-ballot payments. Lastly, June primaries are almost a month away. So thanks again to everyone for your really hard work. And at that point, I'd like to turn things over to our chair.
I guess that's me, yeah?
Yes, the VAAC chair.
Okay. I just say, Eric, I think you're up next. You have an assistant executive report. Can you or remarks? Can you deliver that?
Thank you so much, Chair Torres. I'm going to be really brief. I want to thank the members of the committee and our friends in the public who've joined us tonight. I want to apologize. I'll be leaving the meeting shortly just for a family commitment, but to kick off the meeting, I do want to just take this opportunity to recognize and thank members of the CFB staff we're going to hear from shortly after Zoilo and members of the committee get a chance to say hello. You've heard about, and I want to thank Beth for the recognition. You're going to hear more shortly about the agency's voter analysis report for 2022 and 23. You'll hear from members of our policy and research team, which is led by Ali Swatek. You'll hear from Jamie Anno, Turquoise Baker, Luigi Claude, Catherine Agnes, and Ray Phelps. This team they've published 3 major reports in the past 12 months, and which is an accomplishment that I can't possibly say enough about. They've done some really amazing work, and I'm excited for them to show it off to this group tonight. You're also going to hear from Hannah Edgerton, who's our Director of Candidate Services, and I'm really excited to welcome her into this space to give the group an update on how the Matching Funds program is working in this upcoming elections and how it's helping more candidates run for office and providing opportunity for more New Yorkers to plug into the political process. I want to recognize Mitchell Cohen, our Content Strategy Manager, along with our Director, Winnie Ng. They've worked together to put together a promotional campaign that we run for before elections to let voters across the city know about the important election we have coming up, and Beth talked a little bit about this, and get New Yorkers the information they need to vote with confidence. We're going to hear from Omar Suarez, who's our Director of Partnerships and Outreach. He and his team are really the point of the spear for our outreach and education directly to voters, and he'll talk about the work that he's leading and his team is doing. And last but not least, I want to just recognize and thank our Deputy Director of Public Affairs, Amanda Malillo. She keeps all these ships sailing in the same direction. I want to thank her for that. And she's going to, as I step out, going to help make sure we're moving through the meeting as needed, and that the transitions are smooth. Sometimes in Zoom, we all got to work together to keep the meeting going. So I'm going to close there. And again, just thanks to everybody for showing up to this space and giving us the opportunity to talk about our work. Chair Torres, back to you.
Okay, I'll try to be brief too. I would like to thank everybody for attending this meeting, and I should say that this is the first meeting, the first VAAC meeting of the year. So we hope that it will be interesting. We had the main, well, not the main, but we can start off with the ranked choice voting issue, which is, as you know, the primaries are fast approaching. And that means that it is time for us to talk about ranked choice voting. On Wednesday, May 17th, the New York City Votes will host a virtual ranked choice voting training from 5 to 6 in the evening. And on Wednesday, May 24th, the following week, there will be a similar training for community-based organizations from 9:30 in the morning to 11 a.m. Also available on the NYC Vote website is our interactive ranked choice of voting ballot tool. This tool allows us to vote in a sample ranked choice voting election to ensure that you are submitting a correct ballot. If you have any further questions, check out the ranked choice voting section of the website, which is now available in 13 different languages. Let me just turn the page here and hope I don't trip and fall out the window in the process. Hold on, okay. As many of you already know, the New York City Campaign Finance Board released the 2022-23 voter analysis report last Monday. We will be hearing from the Campaign Finance Board staff later today about this comprehensive report that touches on various headlines from 2022, including the importance of engaging community members in democratic processes. I certainly do not want to ignore a major recommendation in the report consolidating the city, state, and federal elections to boost turnout. That's one of my favorite projects, and I hope that it will soon become the city's major project. I would also like to give a shout out to our Youth Ambassador program. I am proud to announce that we have sent out acceptance letters to the finalists for the first Youth Ambassador program this year. I am eternally thankful for Youth Engagement Coordinator Olivia Brady and the entirety of our CFB team that makes running this program possible. I really want to give a special shout out to Timothy Hunter, who in his May press clippings in which he mentioned the tragic death of the mentally and emotionally disturbed Jordan Neely. It was an enlightening and a sobering description of a situation we see every day and have come to know so well. And I thank Timothy for his comments. Now let's move on to the opening remarks from our VAAC members of any. If there are VAAC members that would like to make some remarks, the floor is yours.
I'll be glad to start, Zoilo.
Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Christopher Malone. I am a white male of middle age with gray and brown hair, more gray than brown these days, wearing a blue shirt, light blue shirt, blue tie, standing at my desk in my office at Farmingdale State College, where I'm the associate provost. I was appointed to this body by Mayor de Blasio in April of 2020, so I'm coming up on close to 3 years. It's hard to believe. I want to say, because I haven't been in a VAAC meeting since Beth took over the reins as executive director. Congratulations, Beth, and I look forward personally to working with you and for the rest of my time on the committee. In those 3 years, I just want to say that, you know, a lot has happened since April of 2020. We've had COVID, we've had early voting, we've had ranked choice voted. We have seen so much in the way that we conduct elections and barriers to that and obstacles that I've seen the Campaign Finance Board help the city overcome. And this report is just another in a long list of impressive documents that the board has put out to do what is an enormous public service to New York City residents. And as a political scientist by training, I think all of us believe in democracy, but at a time when the rest of the country, parts of it seem to be going in the opposite direction and making voting harder for people and making knowledge about voting more difficult, to see what we're doing here with voter education, accessibility, expanding the days and the right to vote is really a tribute to the city itself, but certainly to this body. So kudos to all the staff. Welcome again, Beth, and I look forward to hearing the reports today.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else in the VAAC committee that would like to make some comments or add some questions, some observations? The floor is open.
Hi, I'm Danielle Gerard. I'm the controller's appointment to the VAAC. And I just want to say, as I always do, that the staff does a tremendous amount of work. I'm so glad Eric pointed out that they've done 3 reports in the past 12 months. And so hats off to Amanda and Turquoise and Matt, and I'm sure I'll forget Allie and Mitch and everybody. I'm sure I'm forgetting people, but you all do a tremendous job. So thank you very, very much. On behalf of all the voters in New York City, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Danielle. Any further comments? Going once, going twice, moving the agenda. We have a report now, or that is a presentation, and that's by Hannah Egerton. Hannah?
Hi, thank you so much. So hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Edgerton. I'm the Director of Candidate Services at the New York City Campaign Finance Board. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a white woman with blonde hair, currently in a ponytail. As discussed, there will be an overview of primary election engagement, as well as get out the vote effort. But I'd like to give some background as to what is happening on the candidates end. There are currently 153 registered candidates with the Campaign Finance Board for the upcoming June primary and or November general election. Of the 153 candidates, 142 or 93% are participants in the Campaign Finance Board's public funds program. Interestingly enough, this is actually the same program participation rate we had back in 2021. So it's nice to see some things staying the same. Those who are participants in the program are eligible to receive public funds, and under the program, contributions received from individual New York City residents are eligible to be matched at an 8-to-1 rate. So far, the Campaign Finance Board has distributed $3,691,172 in public funds to 31 candidates. The next payment, as Beth mentioned, is scheduled for this coming Monday, May 15th, for eligible candidates who are in the primary election. One of the many resources the Campaign Finance Board offers all campaigns is a fundraising platform called Contribute, a system we helped to create to help all campaigns collect credit and debit card contributions online. This platform has already seen over $2.5 million in contributions for candidates running in this year's primary and general elections. Contribute can be found on the NYC VAAC's website, which provides countless other resources to voters that will be discussed later on. I do want to note that while our focus is, of course, on the upcoming 2023 primary and general elections, we also have a 2025 citywide election happening at the same time with a June 2025 primary and November 2025 general. There are currently only 8 candidates registered for this election cycle, but we do expect many more. For any questions about running for office or candidate deadlines, the candidate services team at the Campaign Finance Board is here to help, and we can always be contacted with any questions. And thank you all so much.
Thank you, Hannah. Any questions for Hannah? If not, we can move on to the next presentation, which is by Michelle Cohen, Content Strategy Manager. Michelle?
All right, well, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name's Mitchell Cohen. I am the Content Strategy Manager at
Mitchell,
the
sorry.
Campaign Finance Board. No worries at all. I use he, him pronouns. I am a white man with blue glasses and short brown hair. And actually, I am trying to share my screen, but getting an error message. So wondering if the moderator might be able to help me there. But I'm going to be presenting today on the education materials that we have planned for the upcoming primary election as they pertain to ranked choice voting. As you likely know, voters will be using ranked choice voting to vote for city council in June. So I'm going to preview just all of the efforts that we have planned there. And I'm unfortunately still getting an error message to having trouble sharing my presentation.
Are we moving on?
If you just give me one moment, let me check in with the team and I
Okay.
will be right there. Apologies for this. All right, we are back on track. Thank you all. Is everyone able to see that okay? All right. Perfect. Thank you very much. So the first thing that I want to preview is the ad campaign that we have planned for this June. We have a $1 million campaign planned, and we're really going to be targeting neighborhoods that have city council primary elections and with a high propensity of voters under 30 and also naturalized citizens. So you can see here, this is
Michelle?
real. Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to interrupt. I actually still can't see your screen. So can you make sure that you're sharing the presentation?
Yes, sorry about that. What are you seeing currently?
Okay, now I see.
And
Now I see your screen.
There
We're
we
good to go. Thank you,
We are
Mitchell.
good. Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for rolling with that. Apologies. So here we are. Hopefully now you're able to see the sample of.
Mitchell, we can see your notes as well.
Okay.
There you go. Display settings, you should be able to change it. There you
there
go.
we go.
That's better. All right. Well, really thank you all for rolling with us. Now we are good to go. This is really just a preview of the ad campaign that we have planned. So just want to give a disclaimer, this is not final, but really a sample of what we have planned to share. But as you can really see, this is an awareness campaign. The things that we want people to know is that city council is on the ballot and that they will be using ranked choice voting. So we really are embedding ranked choice voting into the heart of this campaign. And this campaign is also going to be available in 8 languages other than English, Spanish, Chinese, Korean, and Bengali. And what we're really excited about for the first time ever, Russian, Arabic, Haitian Creole, and Urdu. In addition to the advertising campaign, we also are going to be mailing out a print voter guide to more than 3.5 million voters who are eligible to vote in the primary election. So you can see here a preview of the Brooklyn guide that I am excited to be receiving in my mailbox in the next several weeks. And inside the voter guide, we're going to have a full 2-page spread devoted specifically to ranked choice voting. On the left side, we'll give a brief overview of what ranked choice voting is, why we're using ranked choice voting, and when we're using ranked choice voting. And also giving really detailed instructions and visuals about how to fill out your ballot. So you'll see those instructions and these examples of how to fill out your ballot correctly, and also examples of what not to do while filling out your ballot throughout a lot of the materials that I'll be sharing tonight. On the right side, we also have information on how votes are counted. So you can see in the left column an example of if a candidate receives a majority of first choice votes, then the election would be over. And on the right column, an example of if no candidate receives a majority of first choice votes, then how the process goes round by round. We've also created a ton of materials that we're going to be distributing to partners and elected officials across the city. So we're printing about 600,000 assets that we're going to be distributing, which is 3 times the number of assets and about 2 times the number of locations that we distributed to past November. So really would like to give a huge shout out to Omar, who will be presenting next, and his team for their work engaging partners across the city. But to preview some of those materials, this is a flyer specifically about ranked choice voting that gives basic information about the primary itself, including offices on the ballot and key dates, and then our description of how to accurately fill out your ranked choice voting ballot. This is available in 13 languages, and there's also a large print version of this flyer that is additionally available in 13 languages. One other material is a double-sided palm card we have that similarly has a lot of basic information about the election. And the thing that I really want to point out here is this is an example of material that is not specifically about ranked choice voting, but really has ranked choice voting education embedded at the heart of it. We're explaining that City Council is the only office that's going to be voted for with ranked choice voting. And then we're directing people to the website specifically for more information about ranked choice voting. So that's one thing that's also going to be just replicated at the heart of all of our efforts this fall. Even if we're not creating ranked choice voting specific materials, that is something that we're going to be talking about. And this likewise is available in 13 languages. We're also planning widespread outreach on social media. We have a social media toolkit that will be available in all 13 languages that we're planning to distribute to elected officials and partners across the city. In addition to all of the basic information about the election itself, we have a number of ranked choice voting specific materials, including here a number of graphics that explain in detail how to fill out your ballot and providing background information, such as what are the benefits of ranked choice voting to voters, and then the reasons why New York is using ranked choice voting in this election. In addition, I would like to give a shout out to the new NYC VAAC content team. Here we have two of our team members, Natalia and Autumn, who are often the stars in videos that we create on Instagram Reels and TikTok. So these are short, very funny, informative videos targeted to youth voters. So the first one of these we actually just released this week. If you want to check that out on NYC VAAC's Instagram account. So the last thing I'd like to walk through is just what materials we have available on our website, nycvotes.org. All of our materials direct people to the website in order to learn more about ranked choice voting. We typically have about 1 million visitors each year, so we know this is really highly trafficked. And our website now, as of early 2023, is available in 13 languages, which we are really excited about. On the website, we have a ranked choice voting section with a homepage that provides an overview, a practice ballot, a tabulation tool, and the top
Tenemos una información general y tenemos
about our site is that it is mobile friendly. About 75% of our visitors access the site on their phones. So here's a quick preview of how most of our users will be seeing the tools I'm about to preview. And our site is also accessible by screen reader. Every component on our site has been tested by the mayor's office for people with disabilities before we've launched it. On our ranked choice voting homepage, we really lead with this 2-minute animated explainer video that walks through the basics of ranked choice voting, why we're using it in NYC, and as you can imagine, how to fill out your ballot and how those votes are counted. So we think this is like a really good high-level overview to first introduce voters into the concept. And I will not play that for you now for the sake of time, but it is available on our website. This is an example of the interactive practice ballot that our chair mentioned earlier. So this is something that we're really excited about, where we have a sample election with 6 candidates who are identified as separate colors. So give voters a chance to actually practice ranked choice voting and make sure they're comfortable with it and familiar with how it works before heading to the polls. And once you submit your ballot, we'll let you know if, in this case, if it's filled out correctly, or if there's an error, and we'll explain exactly what that error was and how to fix it. So in this case, this is the most common and the most severe error in a ranked choice voting election, where if you were to vote for you to rank 2 candidates as your first choice, that would invalidate your ballot. So this is some great example of
datos como su primera elección.
Learn from on the practice site before actually heading to the polls. And the last piece is our tool that will explain how votes are counted. So we have an interactive tool with those same candidates that you just saw that will indicate round by round how that tabulation process works. So we'll demonstrate through on the use of colors on the left side of the screen, we'll demonstrate exactly how those votes are distributed each round. And on the right side of the screen, we'll have a written description that also serves as alt text to be accessible by screen readers. So with that, thank you all. Thank you for bearing with me for the technical difficulties, and happy to answer any questions you may have about these materials.
Thank you, Mitchell. That was a great presentation. Any questions? Going once, going twice. Okay, moving on to the next presentation. The next presentation is regarding the GOTV efforts, and that will be presented by Omar Suarez. Is he in town?
I'm in town. I'm in the office. I'm on the screen, everything.
Oh, okay. Where are you?
I'm at 100 Church Street. Thank you.
Okay. No, I know you're in 100. Oh, there you are. Okay,
yep.
Good.
Thank you, Zoilo. Thank you, VAAC members and chair. Thank you, Executive Director Rotman and the rest of CFB leadership. Good evening, everyone. My name is Omar Suarez. I use he, him pronouns. I am a tan-skinned man of African and Spanish ancestry, wearing a peach button-down shirt, and I have curly black and white hair. I have the pleasure of serving as the Director of Partnerships and Outreach for the CFB, and I lead the team that really, as Eric mentioned earlier, is sort of the tip of the spear in terms of our outreach efforts in New York City for voting and elections work, in particular to increase voter participation and doing direct engagement efforts along those lines. I'm going to share my screen just to, okay. Share my screen so that we can just walk through some of the things that we're planning for this upcoming June 2023 primary election. As folks have mentioned, we have the entire city council up for election this year. Some of those offices have contested primaries where we're conducting outreach efforts to get folks to vote and also educating voters on the ranked choice voting system. As I mentioned, I'm the head of the Partnerships and Outreach Unit. That team consists of the individuals I'm now placing up on the screen just to give folks a nice visual of our great looking team. On the partnership side of Partnerships and Outreach, Gloria Patel, Olivia Brady, Luke Messina, Tinglin are folks who work with community partners throughout the city, you know, in all of the neighborhoods that we've identified as priorities, as well as priority populations such as voters with disabilities, voters who are facing or have had contact with the criminal justice system, young voters, immigrant and limited English proficiency voters. Ama Akwar is our training coordinator and really helps create, update, and deliver training and educational programming, workshops, presentations. Daniel Garcia McGuire and Raymond Russell are the two newest members of our team. They are on the outreach side of Partnerships and Outreach and are helping us, you know, organize some of the direct-to-voter outreach efforts and volunteer engagement efforts to increase voter participation throughout the city. And really looking forward to expanding that side of our work and discussing a bit about it shortly. So for this upcoming primary, we are doing a little bit of work. We're doing work on educational events with our community partners, ranked choice voting education for the public, and direct to voter outreach and voter registration. So I'll cover a little bit, I'll cover some of each of those. I won't go in depth. I won't be able to go in depth in all of the events. We have conducted and planned or scheduled close to 100 voter engagement events, both direct outreach out in person, as well as virtual and in-person educational events, workshops, and presentations. So I won't be able to cover everything, but I'll just give an overview of some of what we're doing for this June 2023 primary. So on the event side and what we're doing to educate the public about the upcoming primary and ranked choice voting, I'll start with just some of our efforts on ranked choice voting education. We're working with community partners, other parts of government, and members of the public to inform voters about ranked choice voting, as is our mandate. We're hosting monthly ranked choice voting webinars, which are can be found on our events on the events page of our website and are open to the public. We have one per month that's for a general audience, then one per month that's more tailored to a youth audience. We're also doing an in-person train-the-trainer session, multiple sessions for community-based organizations to, you know, sort of learn how to use ranked choice voting in their outreach efforts and how to inform their community members and constituents about ranked choice voting. So just utilizing the resources that Mitchell just covered, making sure that those are available to our community partners, NGOs, library systems, membership-based organizations, and others throughout the city, so that they can then help disseminate that information. We also worked with members of the policy and research team to gather the voter registration coordinators from the city agencies that are covered under the LL 29 ranked choice voting law. And we held a training for them back on April 26th. As part of that training, we also shared all of those ranked choice voting resources that Mitchell covered. And we've on in sort of by request or ad hoc basis, we've been giving presentations to those partner organizations at meetings and events that they've been organizing. We've been invited to go and give ranked choice voting presentations, and we'll continue to do that all the way through the June primary. Dozens of those presentations happening on a weekly basis. We're going to multiple organizations, multiple nights a week, and giving our ranked choice voting educational presentation. So we're also hosting, co-hosting and collaborating with partner organizations to organize a deeper engagement and education on civics, ranked choice voting, the June 2023 primary, topics like the importance of local government and participating in local elections. But we're also working with partner organizations to make sure we're reaching some of the more underrepresented audiences, including limited English proficiency in immigrant communities, people with disabilities, justice impacted individuals, and young voters. So something that's new for us is we're hosting in-language events in Bangla, Chinese, Punjabi, and Urdu. This is something we haven't done in the past, and we're really looking forward to a series of events that we're hosting in June. Again, those and our other events can be found on the NYC Votes website. We're giving additional presentations, like I mentioned earlier, where we've been invited to speak to those communities. The work that we're doing with voters with disabilities includes giving a presentation with one of our partner organizations, Downstate Adapt, on voting rights for people with disabilities and some of the accessible voting tools that are available to them. We've also held voter registration drives for unhoused and justice impacted voters. And you can see up on the screen a flyer for an event scheduled for next week with Urban Word, where we're going to use our youth engagement coordinator, Olivia Brady, has been working with that organization to plan this event where youth are going to be able to facilitate conversations using poetry and hip hop as a tool to discuss the importance of civic participation and engagement. So we do find ways to also make these conversations more engaging for young audiences and voters across the city. I just have up here some of those partner organizations that we are working with throughout the city and representing and serving all of the different communities that we've mentioned. So just have those up here, and happy to share as well with members of the VAAC if interested, and go a little bit more in depth. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on and just talk about some of the direct to voter outreach and get out the vote efforts that we have planned. So because this is not a citywide primary, there are primaries in select city council districts. We also have priority neighborhoods that we target our outreach efforts to. There's a somewhat smaller universe of voters than we would normally have in terms of who we can mobilize for the June primary. One of the ways that that's impacted is in our texting program in the past. I think I've mentioned that we used Hustle, which is a peer-to-peer texting platform to reach voters. And we've used that to reach over 2 million voters since 2021. This time around, our universe of voters who are living in the priority neighborhoods that we're targeting in Queens, Brooklyn, and the Bronx, and who have a contested city council or district attorney primary. The Bronx and Queens have district attorney primaries. That's about 250,000 voters. So we're going to host text banks on the first and second week of early voting, with a goal of texting through the entire universe the first weekend, and then coming back and reminding voters that they still have, if they haven't already, that they still have a chance to vote during that last weekend of early voting. And as I mentioned, we're targeting these messages to voters who have a textable number in the priority neighborhoods we've outlined in Queens, Brooklyn, and the Bronx. We also have something that we haven't done in some time is like really organizing more in person out in the field events and activities. Again, taking a look at those neighborhoods that are in our priority areas and have contested primaries. Looking at those areas, finding high traffic areas that are near an early voting site, which we're in the process of sort of finalizing, and setting up visibility and outreach events in those areas where we can distribute our election, ranked choice voting, and outreach materials. We can have conversations with voters, and we can, I direct them to resources on the NYC Votes website as well, and maybe even, guide them over to their early voting site if they happen to vote in the area. I think one of the goals that we will have is to try and motivate folks who maybe haven't thought about it or weren't aware, just to make them aware of the upcoming primary and the fact that we'll be doing this while early voting is active. We also are going to try and select areas that overlap with some of those ad assets that Mitchell talked about earlier, to just kind of leverage that interest from the public and leverage that awareness to actually drive them to their nearby early voting site if they happen to live in the area. This is something that we haven't done a lot of in the last couple of years, due to the pandemic, and then had some staffing turnover. So just re-engaging our partners and volunteers to do more in-person outreach, and then using the virtual texting as more of a complement. This is a longer term goal that we have, and something that we want to see more of moving forward. The districts and neighborhoods that we're talking about, that we're looking at setting up in our Fordham in the Bronx, which has a contested primary with City Council District 14, Jackson Heights in Queens, which is covered by City Council District 25, East New York and Brooklyn, City Council District 42, and Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, City Council District 43. So these all have primaries and are areas that we want to target, either because there are a large number of limited English proficiency voters in these neighborhoods. That's certainly the case in Jackson Heights and Bensonhurst, or areas that have, for some time been seen like really low turnout, both among youth and the general population, which is certainly the case in the Bronx and in East New York. So that's why we're targeting those areas in particular, and we're looking to do that for this June primary. That's what I have for today. Thank you all, and thank you to the VAAC for hosting this important meeting.
Thank you, Omar, for that very informative presentation. Any questions for Omar at this point? If not, we can move on to the presentation on a voter analysis report, and that's from someone from the policy and research team.
Yep. Hey, Zoilo, I'll be leading that section.
Okay, go right ahead.
I just want to thank Omar. He has thank you at the end of his presentation that's still up, but thank you to Omar.
All right, Danielle, I forgot to take the screen down. Is it down now?
Yes.
No, it's
All
down now, but I just thought you were thanking us. I wanted to thank you, that's all.
I was thanking you verbally and through my screen. Thank you, everyone.
Amazing. Great. Well, now I will share my screen. Hopefully this works out. All right. Okay, can folks see my notes, or is it just the main slide? All right, thank you. Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. My name is Turquoise Baker, and I am the Intergovernmental Analyst here at the CFB. I'm a Black woman with a Black head wrap and green shirt. My background is our slightly messy DFB office, and I use she, her pronouns. So today I'm here with my colleagues, Catherine Agnes, Luigi Claude, and Ray Phelps to present a high-level overview of our voter analysis report, or VAR, which was published on May 1st. We'll have time for questions at the end of the presentation, so feel free to put those in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So first, we figured we'd give a quick overview of what the VAR is and what it usually contains. So the New York City Charter requires the CFB to produce an annual report with information on voter registration, participation, voter assistance activities, analyses of the electorate, recommendations for improving voter participation, and more. And we call this report the Voter Analysis Report. Our VARs always go above and beyond the requirements in the charter mandate. The policy and research team spearheads the content analysis and research. That said, creating the VAR is an agency-wide effort, including vital contributions from marketing and digital communications, as well as the product management and operations team. So we appreciate the opportunity to present this report today. So this year's VAR is split into quite a few sections. The first section, Year in Review, covers key state and nationwide events that impacted the 2022 elections. New York City Votes in 2022 highlights the phenomenal work of our colleagues who were most involved in the agency's voter outreach and engagement efforts. This includes Beth, I believe you're off mute. If you'd mind muting your computer, that'd be great. I think we're getting a bit of feedback. I will keep going. Thank you, Beth. So the 2022 elections turnout summary lists key figures on turnout in the 2022 elections. The executive summary gives us a quick look at what's in the remainder of the report. On the ballot in 2022, written by first-time VAR author and superstar Catherine Agnes, who is our team's data scientist, provides an exceptional analysis on elements of the 2022 general, primary, and special elections, as well as an analysis on ballot proposal voting. In the next section, Ray Phelps, Policy and Research's other policy and data research analyst and data extraordinaire, summarizes their exceptional analysis of New York City's redistricting process and the impact of testimonies on the final district lines. The amazing other policy and data research analyst, Luigi Claude, and I will be covering the policy and legislative recommendations. This includes moving elections to even years and making ballot proposals more accessible. We'll cover a few highlights from these sections during our presentation. So as I mentioned, the Year in Review section highlights a few themes and events from 2020. One, unsurprisingly, is redistricting. Voters successfully cast their ballots in 2022 despite confusion surrounding district lines and the split primary. However, the process revealed, fundamental issues with a process that was intended to be nonpartisan. The year started off with several assembly district special elections in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and the Bronx. And voters in New York City also voted on 3 citywide proposals and 1 state proposal. Unfortunately, 2022 was also marked by tragedy. This section touches upon attacks against Black and Asian New Yorkers and anti-Semitic attacks in the city, all of which were a central topic of discussion throughout last year's election cycle. There were also a few legislative developments in 2022. For example, the Our City, Our Vote law, legislation that would have allowed over 800,000 legal permanent residents and those with work authorizations to vote in New York City elections. That legislation was held up in the courts, but the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act actually passed in June. So it's impossible to capture all the events that impacted our elections. However, these and others are worth highlighting as we dive into in-depth analysis on these elections. Now I'll turn it over to Luigi, who will discuss New York City votes in 2022.
Thank you, Turquoise. Hello, everyone. I'm Luigi Claude. I'm one of the policy analysts on the team. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a young Black woman wearing some fun mismatched earring. My hair is kind of in twist, and I'm wearing a white top, a Black cardigan, and I'm in my seemingly barren room. Moving on, in 2022, NYC Votes continued its work to increase interest, engagement, and turnout with voters, even as redistricting at the state level presented the team with new challenges. Advertising campaigns in 5 languages were placed on the TV, radio, and in public spaces like bus shelters and mobile billboards, which you saw is happening again as Mitchell presented. All registered voters also received the print voter guide with information on candidates and ballot proposals. NYC Votes also updated the NYC Votes website with up-to-date information and reached voters through email, text messages, and our awesome social media presence. The team also collaborated with community partners on direct voter outreach and once again held the Youth Ambassador Program, where in 2022, 19 future voters engaged with local history, produced their own original research, and participated in professional development, content creation, and voter outreach opportunities. Something that I want to highlight is that in the NYC Votes in 2022 section, we also include a preview to our language access expansion. The preview walks through how the CFB has been honoring commitments made in past VARs. We committed to translating our website into more languages, and we have been by increasing the number of translated languages available on the site to 12. We also committed to translating our materials into more languages, and Local Law 48 of 2022 mandated a major language expansion of the print, online, and video voter guides. This section highlights how we're working towards meeting and exceeding these goals by increasing staffing to have a team that ensures quality and accuracy in our translations, scaling up linguistic resources with new contracts, and incorporating language access and language access research into the Youth Ambassadors Program. Overall, it's been an eventful year for NYC Votes. Now I'll turn it over to Catherine to talk about election turnout data.
Thank you, Luigi. Hi, everybody. My name is Catherine Agnes, and I'm a data scientist in the policy research team. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an Asian woman with dark brown hair, wearing a beige sweater, and I'm at my apartment in Regal Park right now. Next slide. Oh, and in my section, I'll be discussing about election turnout in 2022. So last year we had 3 major elections that included the general election on November 8 and 2 primary elections in June 28 and August 23rd after New York State's highest court rejected redrawn election maps earlier in the year. And by the end of 2022, the New York City voter rolls contained nearly 5 million active registered voters, representing a voter registration rate of 85.2%. And between newly registered turnout versus overall turnout, as shown on the graph to the left, we see that newly registered voters exceeded overall turnout in all 3 elections. However, we do see the gap is much larger in the general elections, which demonstrates that general elections may be of higher interest to the specific group. And according to the age distribution of newly registered voters, youth voters, voters aged 18 to 29 years made up the largest proportion. Next slide. And looking into overall turnout, both primaries had both relatively low turnout, as both range was a little over 14%. However, turnout was much higher in the general election than the primary elections at 38.3%. Next slide. And looking at the borough level, across both primaries, Manhattan had the highest turnout and the Bronx had the lowest turnout. However, when looking into general elections, Staten Island slightly edged Manhattan in highest turnout, which is a change from the primary elections. And like the primaries, turnout was lowest in the Bronx as well in the generals. And looking at the borough level, this definitely indicates turnout disparity for both primary and general elections in 2022. Next slide. And looking at the overall age distribution, we see that older voters aged 60 through 69 years made up the largest portion of the electorate. And we also see that younger voters aged 18 through 29 years, and voters aged 80 years and above made up the smallest portion of the electorate. And we see that younger voters made up a slightly larger proportion of total voters in the general election than the primary elections, suggesting that general elections may be of higher interest to this age group. Next slide. And some key takeaways when examining vote methods in both primary and general elections, voting on election day was most popular. Next slide. And as demonstrated in the last 4 general elections, we see the regular occurrence of ballot proposals. And some key findings from the 2022 general election ballot proposals include that there is a relatively high rate of drop-off between the total number of ballots cast in the general election and the number of votes cast for each of the proposals. And this is shown as over 1/5 of voters chose to leave ballot proposals 2, 3, and 4 blank. And meanwhile, we see that ballot proposal 1 had the lowest drop-off rate citywide. This could possibly due to being the first question asked, which voters are more likely to answer. And drop-off rates for the ballot proposals vary considerably at the borough level, as we see that Brooklyn had the highest rate of drop-off for each of the 4 proposals, and Manhattan had the lowest drop-off rate. Next slide. And to further our research in elections, we decided to dive deep into special elections this time around. Next slide. So in early 2022, there were 4 special elections for 5 state assembly seats, and this was the highest number of special elections since 2009, when the city held 4 special elections in 7 districts. And though multiple specials are held, they do not occur on set dates, which hurts our efforts to prepare and raise awareness. And this makes it confusing for voters who want to understand who is eligible to vote for a special election and when voting is taking place. And turnout trends from recent special elections within the city show that low turnout rates seen in 2022 are not necessarily unique. And when compared to primary general elections, special elections turnout have historically fallen short, as shown on the graph to the right. And for our research, we particularly focused on special elections between 2015 and 2022. And over this time period, turnout has remained low on average, but with a range between 1.8 to 29%. And the average special election turnout from 2015 to 2022 was a little over 8%, which is pretty low. Next slide. And for our research in special elections, we sought to answer the following questions listed below. And this includes which areas of New York City had the lowest voter turnout, who lives in those low turnout areas, and which demographic and socioeconomic factors influence the voting behaviors of New Yorkers in special elections over the last 7 years. Next slide. And in order to compare different areas of the city and to adjust for the variations in the number of special elections, we adapted our participation score from the 2020 voter analysis report for each individual voter in New York City just for special elections. And our participation score looks at a 7-year time frame of 16 special elections in 24 districts. And this allowed us to identify voters who score highly because they vote in every special election or most special elections versus voters who vote intermittently or not at all. And our overall city's mean participation score is 9.5, which is relatively low. Next slide. And looking at the borough level.
9.5, que era bien bajo. Manhattan fue el condado que tuvo los participantes más altos y el
elections, which is similar in all primary and general elections. Next slide. And looking at the council district level, mean participation score by council district ranged from 4.7 to 17.1, and almost 60% of council districts underperform the citywide participation score. And most of these districts are located in the Bronx and East Brooklyn. Next slide. And looking at the overall age distribution, older voters made up the largest proportion of total voters in each special election. Youth voters made up the smallest distribution in the majority of special elections, followed by voters aged 80 years and above. And overall, this indicates that older voters are more likely to turn out than younger voters in special elections. And likewise, these findings are reflected in primary and general elections, which demonstrates that older voters represent a larger proportion of total voters compared to younger voters in city elections overall. Next slide. And as we were analyzing special elections data, there were many limitations that made it impossible to answer our third research question, which is which demographic and socioeconomic factors influence the voting behaviors in New York City of New Yorkers in special elections. And these limitations include that the data followed a non-normal distribution, the need for more data to effectively model who turns out in these specific elections, the lack of scholarship the lack of scholarship on turnout in special elections, and the unique makeup of voters in local, state, and federal special elections. And the unique and inconsistent nature of special elections data may require research practices beyond what has been conducted in our previous research on elections. And this is all I have for this section. Thank you. And I'm going to pass the stage to Ray to discuss their redistricting analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm Ray. I'm a white, masculine, presenting non-binary person with short brown hair. And today I'm wearing a black t-shirt and I'm at my also kind of barren apartment. And today I'll be presenting on our redistricting analysis, which involved a series of qualitative and quantitative analyses of written public testimony that was submitted by New Yorkers during the 2022 City Council redistricting process. Next slide, please. And I'm just going to start with a brief overview of how redistricting works in New York City. So once every 10 years, an independent commission called the Districting Commission, whose members are appointed by City Council and the mayor, redraw the council district lines using guidelines set by the city charter. And just some of those guidelines include ensuring equal population size across districts, keeping communities together, and avoiding gerrymandering. So during this process, the Districting Commission also solicits feedback from the public and incorporates that feedback before submitting the final maps to City Council for approval. So for the redistricting section of the voter analysis report, we analyzed that public feedback that was submitted to the Districting Commission, and we conducted a word frequency analysis, sentiment analysis, and effectiveness analysis on that testimony to try to get a sense of how New Yorkers were feeling during the redistricting process and whether their testimony actually influenced the final district lines. Next slide, please. So yeah, those are the three key areas of analysis. Sorry, next slide, please. So our first analysis was a word frequency analysis, and what you can see on the screen here is the 75 most frequently used words in all the testimony that was submitted to the Districting Commission by New Yorkers. And as you can see, the most common word in the testimony was community, which was actually mentioned on average more than 3 times per testimonial. And the second most common word, neighborhood, was mentioned on average more than once per testimonial. And part of our word frequency analysis also involved calculating a measure called the inverse term word frequency for each district mentioned in the testimony, which identified the top 3 words that had the highest relative frequency in that district compared to other districts. This analysis allowed us to identify the key issues that were most relevant to specific districts, as well as how those key issues regarding the district lines changed over the course of the redistricting process as the Districting Commission released new drafts of the district lines. Next slide, please. Next, we performed a sentiment analysis, which identified the percentage of negative, positive, and neutral words in the testimony during each phase of the redistricting process. So the phases I have on the slide here, phase 1 is the period from before the first maps were released up until when the first map was released. And phase 2 is the period in between the release of the first and second draft maps. Phase 3 is the period between the release of the second and final draft maps. And phase 4 is the period after the final map was released to the public and submitted to City Council. And as you can see here, phase 3, again, the period after the second draft maps were released to the public and before the final maps were released and submitted to City Council. That's the phase that had the highest percentage of negative words and lowest percentage of positive words, which is just some evidence to suggest that that was the period of the redistricting process that New Yorkers had most qualms with the draft lines. Next slide, please. So finally, we conducted an effectiveness analysis to test whether the commission actually took testifiers' feedback into consideration when revising the maps. And part of that analysis was looking at whether districts that were mentioned more frequently in the testimony saw more changes in between the first draft maps and the final draft maps compared to districts that were rarely mentioned. And as you can see here, we found this was in fact the case, which suggests that community members who wrote testimony had a real impact on the redistricting process. And this is just really scratching the surface of the word frequency, sentiment analysis, and effectiveness analysis that we did on the report. So if you're interested in learning more, I suggest looking at the full report. And now I'm just going to pass it over to Luigi to talk about the policy and legislative recommendations that we make in the report.
Thank you, Ray. This year, the report includes 2 legislative recommendations that address low turnout rates, the legacy of disenfranchising legislation, and the ways language barriers impact the voting process. The 2 recommendations aim to improve the voting experience for all voters. Next slide, please. The first recommendation is to change the timing of city elections so that they coincide with either state or federal races. Currently, city elections are held in odd-numbered years, called off-cycle elections, while state and federal elections are held in even-numbered years, called on-cycle elections. With this schedule, voters have to show up more often to the polls to cast their ballots for representatives at all levels. Consequently, elections with big-ticket races like presidential elections see far higher turnout than like mayoral elections. The average turnout in New York City for presidential elections since 2001 is 60.8%. In that same time period, average turnout for gubernatorial elections is 35.6%, and for mayoral elections, just 29.5%. Not only is turnout low, it is also unevenly representative. Research found that in off-cycle elections, white folks made up a much larger share of voters than the share they represented in the overall population, while in those same elections, Latinx and Asian American voters made up a smaller share than they represented in the overall population. This skewed representation decreased in on-cycle elections, meaning turnout was more representative of the people who lived there. Even year elections also decrease the number of times voters have to go to the polls, decrease election administration costs, and can potentially decrease the influence that special interest groups have on election outcomes. The multiple and varied benefits to even year elections makes it worth pursuing in order to improve elections. Next slide, please. It is not enough to say that elections should occur in even years. We then have to figure out how we can determine what schedule to follow and how it becomes enshrined in the law. This flowchart highlights a few of the ways that the state legislature and city council can take in tandem to make sure that even year elections are possible. No matter what, the change starts out by amending the state constitution up at the top in that reddish orange color, which is where the current law about local elections is held. Then, depending on what is or is not included in the constitutional amendment, legislators at the state and city level will have to take further action to include election timing language in the law. This chart also highlights that county level races, including district attorney, will also need to be kind of amended depending on the path in order to make sure that when local elections are aligned, kind of everything gets aligned. Now I'll pass it over to Turquoise to talk about the second recommendation.
Great, thanks, Luigi. So our second recommendation relates to ballot proposal accessibility. In short, lawmakers should pass legislation that requires all state and local ballot proposals to be written in plain language. So the first part of this section summarizes a few ways voters and elected officials can get proposals on the ballot. To give a very high-level summary, state legislators and city council members are prohibited from making certain types of changes without voter approval. At the city level, that includes certain changes to the city charter. At the state level, that includes amendments to the Constitution and some matters related to, for example, bonds. And this is the reason New Yorkers voted on the 3 citywide proposals amending the charter and the statewide proposal during the 2022 election concerning environmental protections and bonds. There are a lot of legal requirements related to getting a proposal on the ballot at the state and city levels. However, there are hardly any requirements related to the way proposals are actually written, and that fact is quite obvious. Anyone who has been voting in New York for a few years can attest that ballot proposals in the state are notoriously confusing. To get a better idea of just how confusing the proposals can be, We ran the 4 2022 ballot proposals through the Hemingway editor, an online writing tool that assesses text readability and assigns each submission a US grade level. Hemingway is an easy but largely inadequate measure of readability. Still, it can serve as an informal proxy for understanding how complicated some of the ballot proposals are. The 2022 statewide proposal is here on the screen, and I'll just read it out. To address and combat the impact of climate change and damage to the environment, the Clean Water, Clean Air, and Green Jobs Environmental Bond Act of 2022 authorizes the sale of state bonds up to $4.2 billion to fund environmental protection, natural restoration, resiliency, and clean energy projects. Shall the Environmental Bond Act of 2022 be approved? Hemingway evaluated this passage and designated it as a postgraduate level excerpt, and for good reason. To highlight just a few, most people won't understand what natural restoration or clean energy projects entail. Also, seeing the maximum cost of state bonds written out may be jarring for some readers as well. Excuse me. So that brings us to our recommendation. To ensure that all voters can easily understand ballot proposals, state and city legislators should pass laws mandating that ballot proposals in all languages be written in plain language. Now, what is plain language? Well, plain language does not dumb down information presented to voters. It presents communications in a clear and concise manner using everyday terms that are easy to understand. And there are several benefits to this. Plain language can make information more accessible for voters with disabilities, including those with low vision and cognitive and intellectual disabilities. It can also reduce the likelihood of voters with limited English proficiency being disenfranchised, but there are still a few things to consider. As I mentioned before, Hemingway is a good tool to quickly check readability, but it is definitely imperfect. Grade level is a rather subjective measure of readability, and also tools like Hemingway are few and far between for non-English languages. Additionally, many strategies that are used to ensure that English prose is easy to read, like shorter sentences, less passive voice, specific verbiage, etc., do not apply to all non-English languages. If this is to be done right, experts who understand strategies for writing in plain language for whatever language they know must be involved in the entire process. Proposals should not be placed on the ballot without solicitation of feedback from New Yorkers of different cultures, languages, socioeconomic statuses, political parties, and other key population identifiers. Now, this may not be a quick process, but it is definitely an important one. New York has made great strides to improve accessibility over the years, and there's definitely more to be done. Now, there are so many people who are involved in creating this report. The screen lists just a few. We'd like to give a big shout out to Ali Swadek, Director of Policy and Research, and Jamie Ano, Senior Data Scientist, who have overseen and contributed to the research in this report. Also, Crystal, Winnie, Mitchell, Madonna, Tim Hunter. Thank you. Everybody has just been phenomenal. And extra shout out to Luigi, Ray, and Catherine, who's, just spectacular analysis has really, driven all this home. Yes, and thank you so much for listening in. We have our emails up here. We're happy to answer questions right now, and you're always welcome to email us after this meeting, and we'll try to get back to you with what we can.
Thank you, research team. I think we're going to open it up now to anyone who has any questions, comments, or points of information regarding the report. And also, I want to combine if there are any closing remarks that would like to be made, they could be made now. So we're opening up the floor to the VAAC members for their remarks.
Danielle, I see your hand raised, but I can't see the Q&A, so sorry if I'm skipping anyone.
Yeah, thanks very much. That was terrific. I only have two questions. And one is, how does this report get disseminated? Is it sent by link to all kinds of people, and just vaguely who receives it? And then my other question is, I think that I saw it, but I didn't really see it, which was the young versus old turnout for general excuse me, younger people versus older people turnout for general elections versus primary elections. And the slide went by too fast, and I know we have copies of the report, but as long as we're talking about it, is it possible to see that page again? Because the turnout for 18 to 29 for primaries was really low, and I missed what it was for general.
Absolutely. I can answer your first question, and then Catherine, if you'd like to let us know what slide it is, I can switch to that slide as well. But yes, this report is distributed to as many people as we can. Once it's published, we send it out to as many elected official offices as we can. So public advocates offices, state level offices, city offices, community boards, really any type of governing community body that we can gets this report. We also send it out to many of our partners, some of them who, join our regular meeting calls, and others, outside of our immediate networks. It is available on our website in addition to all of our reports. So the post-election report we published late last year with additional, findings is also available on the website. But obviously, we hope that you will share this report, far and wide. We think it has a lot of great information. And yeah, we're always looking for new ways to get this information out. And Catherine, yeah, I don't know if you know which slide I can switch to.
I believe it's on slide 10.
I can also find it. I just one of the reasons I thought it was interesting is because if it's broken down by borough and it's broken down by age group in various places, I was wondering if it's broken down by community or neighborhood or something, and that the council members who represent that area could understand what they need to do to get out the vote. That would be extremely handy. Or how they can help you all get out the vote. That would be extremely handy.
For sure. In the VAR, we actually dive deep into at the community district level, and yeah, at the community district level. So I wasn't able to include it for this time around just for time reasoning, but yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any other questions in the chat at the moment? No? All right. Well, I will stop sharing my screen.
Moving on, I guess it's like every meeting that I attend, I get so much information from everyone that I'm really glad that we do have these meetings. And if there are no further questions or point of information from the VAAC members, then I have to turn it over to the closing remarks of Beth Rotman. Beth, would you like to make some closing remarks? Are you there?
Beth, I think you're on mute.
Oh, there she is. Okay.
Great. Okay, sorry about that. I want to thank everybody again. This was just an extraordinary, was it still muting me? Okay, sorry about that. Really, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
We can hear you.
I'm sorry. It looked like it was going back on mute. Really an extraordinary amount of work goes in, as you can see, because this was just the highlights and tip of the iceberg. But I think what it shows is that through the work of the VAAC and the partnership with the extraordinary team at the Campaign Finance Board and all of the work together at bringing the state-of-the-art tools and also the human-centered and people-centered approach and outreach across the city. We are all together partnering in our many different ways to work and put our many best feet forward for the people of New York. So I just want to say personally, I'm honored to be at the head of the CFB, and am just always blown away by these presentations, by this extraordinary team. And I know they stand here representing an even broader team that is a really, really deep bench of talent. So I just want to say, wow, and I'm blown away. So proud to be the still pretty new ED of the CFB, but just what an amazing team effort. And I think that you all really make the CFB proud and the VAC proud. And thank you again for this tip of the iceberg sample of this extraordinary work. And, you know, can't wait to see what happens next. Thanks again.
Well, on that note, I would like to thank everyone for a very efficient meeting. We made it through in less than 2 hours. So I guess at this point, we're adjourning. So we can sign off.
Amanda, did you have a
yes.
comment?
Zoilo, I just wanted to chime in. I apologize for everyone. I'm Amanda Malillo. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Affairs. I know a couple of folks had their hand raised as attendees. Because we are running this as a webinar, we ask that if you have questions, you pop those into the Q&A and we can answer those live. I want to thank Eddie, who sent us, Eddie Cuesta from DUSA, who said, great report. Thank you, Eddie, for always being such a fantastic supporter of our work. I know if you have any questions, feel free to pop those in the chat. So this is one I just want to pose to the policy and research team. I actually have a series of questions from this person, from Aaron Berry in the Q&A. The first is, after reading the report, I came away with the conclusion that one, New York State youth turnout increased in 2022 compared to 2018. And two, the NYC youth turnout decreased in 2022 compared to 2018. Is that correct? So I want to kick that question to the policy and research folks who looked at this.
Okay.
I think maybe Ray or Jamie, if y'all have comments on that point.
I didn't look at youth turnout data this year.
Oh, then Catherine, sorry.
I can try to answer it. So the question is about youth turnout in 2018 versus 2022. Right?
Yes, specifically the New York State youth turnout, state not city, increased in 2022 compared to 2018, whereas NYC youth turnout decreased in 2022 compared to 2018. And this person was asking if that's correct.
We don't really look at state turnout so much, even for comparisons. I'll say there was a bit of a the midterms in 2018 were a bit of an anomaly. There was a bit of a Trump effect happening across turnout. And so you saw it was almost, I believe, like 40%, something like comparable almost to a presidential year. So I'll just say that. I probably doesn't answer your question, but we don't really take a look at New York State turnout. So I apologize. You can ask, send your question to Allie. She has her email in the chat, and we can do further research for you if you would like.
And we will be sure to follow up. The other question from Eddie was, were there any findings about low turnout in the Bronx specifically?
I'll try to answer that question as well. The Bronx is traditionally has the lowest turnout in the city. And so we really just found a continuation of that trend, unfortunately.
Thank you, Jamie. All right, Zoilo, those are our last questions. So I'm going to turn to you now to adjourn the meeting. Thanks for taking a moment just to answer questions from the audience. Back to you.
Great. If there are no further questions, then like I said, this has been a very efficient meeting with a lot of information, and we hope we can digest it and disseminate it among our peers and community. So I think we can start signing off now. There are no further questions. No further questions, going once, going twice, going 3 times. Sign off. Thank you, everyone.
Bye all.
Bye.